We are back. Golenbock University. Fantasy baseball tonight. Rotisserie League talk.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Veeck talk. I've got the professor on the line. Peter Golenbock. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm currently in 4th place in the American Dream League.
I'm
thrilled.
Currently
Thrilled.
basement Bertha in a Yahoo League. I got off to a horrible start. Had a good day today, and wow, what a horrible start! I can tell you a bad fantasy day. Literally, Quintana, Ian Kennedy, and 2 other pitchers got schlonged on the same day early on.
Yeah, they did. Right.
The season, and
fortunately, none of them belong to me.
Yeah, but I think you have Altuve.
No, I don't. I've got the shortstop.
Oh, I have the shortstop too. I can't think of his name right offhand.
Correa.
A very humble guy who really credits Altuve for a lot of his success. And that's a good draft. Now, you went back from Florida to New York and met with your old cronies. And
do it every year. Every year. The
Sunday
of or before the baseball season begins. It's the most important holiday of the year. It's bigger than Christmas.
Okay, great. And Hanukkah put together, I'll bet, the way you do.
That too, yes.
Okay. So, do you meet at a restaurant?
We do. We meet at O'Reilly's Restaurant, Broadway and 35th Street. No, 35th Street. There are 2 O'Reillys. We meet at the one at Broadway and 35th Street. We're up on the 2nd floor. We're members of the American Dreams League. You know, originally the people who started Rotisserie Baseball owned this league. They had started the year before with the National League Rotisserie team, and they wrote the book about it. Danny Okrent and his boys, Danny Okrent, who should be in the Baseball Hall of Fame because he invented the game of rotisserie baseball, and as we all know, he neglected to patent the thing. And so he is probably right now not one of the world's billionaires because of that. Because there's now rotisserie baseball, rotisserie football, rotisserie soccer, rotisserie golf. There's even rotisserie NASCAR. It's really unbelievable. What he invented was so special that it literally took over the entire sporting world. And so what happened, this was about 1980, 81, something like that. So the next year, the same boys came up with the American Dreams League, but then they decided 2 leagues was too much. And so I'd say 9 of the 12 owners in our league right now are our original owners going back to 1981. I joined the league in 1984. I was asked to join and thrilled to do so.
What an honor.
After the first year in the league, finishing dead last, of course, I was asked by Simon & Schuster to write How to Win at Rotisserie Baseball, which was fabulous because I got to ask all the old pros how to play the game. And I finally,
right, and you had the statistician that you worked with.
Alex Patton. Yeah, Alex Patton was my numbers guy. I must have done that book for 5 years until what should come along but something called the computer. Once computers came along, nobody needed my book because everything was on the Internet. But it was a wonderful run while it was going on. It was a lot of fun. I got a lot of pleasure in doing the interviews for it and writing the thing up. It was just great fun. We just have a great league, and the rules are quite wonderful. You get to pick 14 hitters and 10 pitchers from the American League, and you get $260 to spend on those 24 players. So, for instance, if you spend $46 on Trout, you better be spending a hell of a lot less money on the other players.
Right. No matter how it's done, sometimes it's done by draft, sometimes it's done by numbers. It's all based on putting a potential worth on a player that you think is going to do better than the stats that they've done, or come into their prime, or have their best year. What are some of the things that you can pass on that help you determine who will be a comer, a guy who you can buy cheap and get the most bang for the buck, or draft that nobody else would be drafting, that kind of thing? What are things that you look for in a player position, and in a pitcher?
I like to put at least 5 stars on my team to anchor the rest of the team. So this year, for instance, I bought Carlos Correa for $34 to be the shortstop. And one of the things I discovered is that there are many more decent outfielders in the game than there are infielders. So, for instance, if you're not careful, you end up, as I did this year, with Tim Beckham for $3 as your second baseman. Because there are only a handful of decently priced second basemen in the league. And by the time, I had spent sufficient money, for instance, I paid $30 for Chris Sale. Let's see, who else I paid for?
Hey, how much did Murphy go for, the former Met who seems to be terrible?
That's National League. This is strictly American.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're
just
right.
American League. So Craig Kimbrell, for instance, the Boston closer, I paid $24 for, because that's one category. I had a $2 Ryan Madsen from last year. I picked up Doolittle from Oakland for $20-something, and to cover him, picked up Ryan Madsen for $2, and then Doolittle got hurt, and Madsen became the closer, and had about 30 saves for my $2. And that's one of the things that I like to do.
I'm doing that with Reed and Familia. I got
that's
Reed,
right.
Same sort of thing.
Right.
Has there been a determination as to who the closer is going to be in Oakland? Is it going to be Casilla?
No, it's going to be Madsen.
Oh, it is going to be Madsen.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to be Madsen.
Okay.
Casilla's a rookie. I mean, Casilla's an interesting guy, but Madsen's
no, Casilla's the guy that came from the Giants.
Oh, okay. He came from the Giants. But Madsen's got the job as far as I know. And if he doesn't have the job, that's going to sadden me greatly, because for my $2, I'm expecting 30 saves from him. One of the other things I like to do, for instance, last year, Alex Cobb, who was one of the fine pitchers for the Tampa Bay Rays, was injured. We bid $5 on Cobb, thinking that perhaps after surgery he might come back in September and be worth something. But at the least, for the 2017 season, for $5, he'd be hopefully a $21 or $22 pitcher for $5. So that's one of the things that you do. The thing about pitching, you can take risks on pitchers who are $2 and $3 and $4, because if they don't work out, you can chuck them over the side and pick up somebody, in the free agent drafts each week.
For instance, if Casilla turns out to be the closer and wins that job, you can pick him up as well.
Oh, no, somebody's got him. In our league, everybody knows everything in our league. Oh, no, somebody owns him. There are no stars. There are no stars right now that are owned by anybody, that are not owned by anybody.
Well, not necessarily a star. You can have somebody winning a position and
but if it's somebody who is vying for a position, I guarantee you one of those 12 of our owners owns that guy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's all American League, so
right. You know it. You know
essence,
everybody. Exactly.
Yes.
One of the things I did this year, one of the things I did last year, is I took a chance on Byung-Ho Park, who was a DH first baseman for the Minneapolis Twins. He had come from Korea, I believe, where he had hit 40 home runs a season for like 3 or 4 seasons. And I thought, if this thing works out for my $12, I'd have a hell of a ball player. Well, Park came up, and in the first 6 weeks, hit 12 home runs. And I thought, oh my, this guy's going to take me to the championship. And then he hurt his wrist, and he was basically useless. He didn't do anything else for the next couple of months, and they sent him for surgery. But for $12, I probably got my $12 worth. But this year, nobody picked him. And after we bid for our players, we then have a round of seven different rounds, where you can then choose players who have not been in the auction. And the first guy I picked,
it's a farm system.
Yes. So the first guy I picked was Byung-Ho Park, because for a while there it looked like he might be the number 4 batter for Minnesota this year. And then, of course, the vagaries of the game being what they are, Minnesota sent him down to the minors, and he's still in the minors.
Right.
And I'm hoping at some point that they will see the benefit of having this guy in their lineup and bring him up, which would be.
Well, they've got Maurer over on first now, and that guy is a hitter, a professional hitter, long time, many years of.
No question, but it's interesting. He has sort of sunk so far. He used to be a $25, $26 player, but Maurer has come so far.
Yeah, when he was a catcher.
Yeah. I think this year Maurer went for $8. So his usefulness is less.
Yeah, probably more so. Again, based on the position, a guy who can play an infield position and hit well.
Yeah, actually, he went for $6.
More.
I just looked him up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I try to do when I pick my teams, I try to get 2 decent catchers. I mean, a lot of teams end up with terrible catchers. So this year I got Yan Gomes of Cleveland and James McCann of Detroit. They cost me $8 and $7, which is not too bad for guys who are going to hit 10 or 15 or 20 home runs each and have a fairly decent batting average. And I try to bone up on the infield. I try to get as many big boppers in the infield as I can. I've got Chris Davis. I paid $26 for him. He's my first baseman. Carlos Correa, who had an absolutely unbelievable year last year. A lot of home runs, 100 RBIs, 20 stolen bases, $34. And I got Longoria, who I was able to get for $23, and I'm hoping that Longoria will have an equally terrific time.
Peter, it's always nice to have versatility as well, in case you have injuries and guys can play multiple positions. How does your league determine player eligibility?
If he has played in a particular position 10 games, he is eligible to be put at that position. Okay,
for the rest of the year, is that how it goes?
For the rest of the year and the next year.
Okay. And after that, it's based on what they've played.
Right.
The
next year. Right. In actuality. Right. Correct.
Whoa, you guys really have it down. When you said
we absolutely have it down.
Next year.
Yeah. For instance, you can keep. We have what are known as keepers. In other words, you can keep players for 2 years. The team that finishes first can only keep 4 players. The team that finishes second can keep 5. The team that finishes third can keep 6. The team that finishes fourth keeps 7. Then the middle guys can keep 8, and then we penalize the people who finish 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th by limiting their keepers as well. But, you know, if you get lucky, last year, for instance, we picked up Rajai Davis for $4. Nobody ever thought the guy was going to play, and he ended up starring for Cleveland and stealing 48 bases. One of the reasons our team came in fourth last year was Rajai Davis for $4, stole all those bases. It was fantastic. And then we got Kendry Morales last year for 11, and he had
another
monster
professional hitter.
And this year he got traded from Kansas City over to Toronto, which is fabulous. I just spent the last several days watching Toronto come into the Trop and playing our Rays. Morales is just a tremendous hitter. And last year I got Jackie Bradley Jr. for $9, and he had a marvelous year. And hopefully, even though he got hurt today, he'll come back soon and have another terrific year.
Peter, are you aware of MLB.TV.com or /TV.com, where for a comparatively small amount of dollars comes the ability to streamline every game played on home or away TV, depending on your wants and needs, except for regional blackouts. So for me, I can't see the Giants and the
Well,
A's.
It's brilliant. I mean, the fact of the matter is I have a flip phone. So chances are my flip phone is not going to get
no, but you can play it on your computer as well as the flip. Yes, you won't be able to play it on your flip phone for sure, but you can play it on your computer. And when you see, when you get accustomed to just having it, may encourage you to go down and join the 20th century and buy a smartphone. There are
you would not be the first person to encourage me to do that. The nice thing about it is that I'm not attached to my phone 24 hours a day. I drive in the car, and half the people are sitting and talking on the telephone. It drives me crazy. I sit at my desk. If you want me, if you want me, you can call me.
I taught traffic school for a while. An incredible distraction, right up there with sleep deprivation that doesn't get enough
absolutely.
Credit.
It's right up there with booze.
Which, yes, sleep deprivation is right up there with booze too.
Right.
Yes, that does drive you crazy, but you don't have to be tied to the phone. You can let the phone answer the voicemail, and you can still have the benefit of asking talking into the computer, who has the most home runs ever, whatever comes into your mind, a question or finding and going to websites.
Ralph, I have Alexa. In the morning, I say, "Good morning, Alexa," and she goes, "Good morning to you." And at night, I say, "Good night, Alexa," and she says, "Good night." And if I want to know the name of the star actress in the movie such and such, I ask Alexa, and Alexa tells me.
As long as she's home waiting for you, but on the road or in the park or walking around or on the way to play softball or whatever, I'm just telling you that and having the games.
Whatever happened to living a solitary life? Whatever happened to that? I do not understand.
Wasn't that a Neil Diamond song, Solitary
Man? Yes, Solitary Man. I do not understand why you
Solitary
need to be connected. Yes. So you're talking to the wrong guy.
Okay.
I have been accused of sitting on my computer looking at my on-roto stacks much too often to see where my team is in relationship to the other teams, because it has up to the minute.
I know.
Not only of the major league games, but of the rotisserie teams as well.
And you transfer that to a device with a click of your little finger.
Yes,
and
that's just what I need to be attached to my rotisserie team 24 hours a day.
Right. You need that like a Lochen cup, like a Lochen cup.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Bill Veeck. We talked off the air a little bit. The name of your team is.
We are the Bill Veecks, actually.
You're the Bill Veecks. Probably the man who would have had Branch Rickey, Mr. Rickey, not brought Jackie Robinson in. I think Bill Veeck was a sure bet to have been the. Obviously, Larry Doby came up a few days after him. Among the most incredibly interesting men in the world, am I correct?
Well, there's a story that you may or may not know that in 1939, Bill Veeck came up with the plan that he was going to buy the Philadelphia, either the Phillies, I think it was the Phillies. He was going to buy the Philadelphia Phillies. And what he intended to do is take the 10 best players from the Negro Leagues and sign them to play on the Phillies. He was going to take Satchel Paige. He was going to take Josh Gibson. He was going to take Judy Johnson. He was going to take the greatest of the greats from the Negro Leagues in 1939, and he made a mistake. 39, yes. He made a mistake.
Those guys were all in their primes back then.
Oh, you bet. You bet. And the mistake he made was that he told the president of the American League at the time, who I believe was Ford Frick. Yes, it was, because the commissioner, as you know, was Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Right.
So he made the mistake of telling Ford Frick, who was as big a racist as any of them. And Ford Frick then told Landis, and they arranged very quickly to have the Philadelphia team sold to somebody else. And that precluded Bill Veeck from doing what he intended to do.
Wow.
And that would have been so interesting. Because that
absolutely.
It also probably would have started riots in a whole bunch of cities as well, because in 2017 we cannot appreciate the depth of the racist nature of this country back in 1939 or even 1947 when Jackie Robinson came up.
Well,
I think Jackie Robinson coming up to the majors, I think, was as close to a miracle as anything that's ever happened in sports, and I mean an absolute miracle. When Branch Rickey proposed this idea to the 16 baseball owners, there were 8 teams in the American League and 8 teams in the National League. They took a vote, and the vote was 1 to 15. Rickey was the 1, and 15 was the vote against. The Giants didn't want blacks because Polo Grounds was in Harlem, and Horace Stoneman said, if we have blacks playing in the Polo Grounds, we're going to have riots. St. Louis, which is an incredibly racist town, of course, they didn't want Jackie. They never wanted Jackie. And so
Stoneham jumped on the bandwagon so quickly.
Yeah.
With Willie and Monty Irvin.
Well, I'll tell you what. This is to all the credit of Jackie Robinson. What happened was Albert Happy Chandler was the baseball commissioner. And this is part of the miracle of the whole thing, because Chandler was not only the governor of Kentucky, but he was also U.S. Senator from Kentucky as well. And as you know, Kentucky is this incredibly red state. It was a southern state, of course, still is. Mm-hmm. And so Rickey had to get Chandler's permission to let Jackie Robinson come into baseball. And it was entirely up to Chandler. If Chandler had said no, that would have been it. But Chandler had a conscience. And Chandler said to Rickey, if you want to bring this fella up, when I die, I don't want to have to meet my maker and have to explain to him why I would not allow African Americans to come up to the major leagues. And therefore, if you want to try this, I'm with you. And of course, what happened was, as soon as Happy Chandler's contract was up, they fired him. And I'm convinced that they fired him because of that more than for any other reason. But at any rate, Robinson was signed by the Brooklyn Dodger organization, and the other part of the miracle, of course, was that the Dodgers AAA team wasn't in Texas or wasn't in
the South, Alabama.
Wasn't in the capital of Georgia, or wasn't in Baltimore, or wasn't in St. Louis. Their AAA team was in Montreal, Canada. And so when Jackie Robinson went to play for Montreal, Canada, he went to look for housing, and he and his wife Rachel, and this was the beauty of writing the book Bums. I mean, the great joy obviously was interviewing the players, but to be able to sit with Rachel Robinson for 2.5 hours to hear her story of Jackie's first year and Jackie's playing in Brooklyn was just very, very, very special for me. And she told how there was an apartment house that she and Jackie liked very much in Montreal, and they went up there very much expecting to be told no. And instead, they were taken in open arms. And so, of course, by all means, Canada was not a racist country. They had not had slavery. They didn't have the whole Jim Crow.
Witness how well Paul Robeson got along outside of America. This is a country that was founded by slave owners, and so imperial.
Well, all of the first presidents were slave owners, including George Washington. He owned slaves.
Right, and he was the guy that when we were in elementary school, I shall not tell a lie, that kind of thing. The myth we got about how the world evolved, how the country evolved, how things is incredible.
That's when we have the classes about Jackie Robinson to my sports class here at USF in St. Pete. What they can't possibly comprehend is what the race situation was like in 1946, 1947, 48, 49. They just don't understand that bringing an African American to play on a team in America was unheard of. Obviously unheard of. He was the first. But for a lot of towns, it was surprising that they didn't have riots. I mean, when Jackie played for Montreal, they played in towns like Louisville and Baltimore. And in one game in Baltimore, in which Jackie, played well enough to beat them and was one of the reasons they won, there was a mob that descended upon the clubhouse that was threatening to hang him. They got him the hell out of there fast because this mob seriously wanted to hang Jackie Robinson.
Whoa.
That's how bad.
Yeah, when I think about those days playing in Montreal was only home. They had to go on the road, and the road was America.
Right. That's right.
Now that I also had a moment or two to digest what you were saying about Veeck, I think all racism is caused by fear, ignorance and fear of loss.
Correct. That's right.
With that said, because of the Depression era, what made it a little easier for Jackie in the late 40s after the war was that there was an upsurge in jobs. People coming out of the service, everybody was working.
Yeah.
It wasn't so in the 1930s with the Depression.
No, that's right. You had a lot of African Americans working side by side with whites in those factories. You did.
In the 40s.
And the other thing, in the 40s. And the other thing that you had is for most of the war, blacks and whites were kept segregated in the Army. In fact, changing the subject just a tiny bit, the fabulous giant outfielder Monty Irvin. I think I told you in an earlier conversation, he confided in me that Rickey had asked him to be the first before he had asked Jackie Robinson. But that he was so beat up emotionally from taking crap from the Southern officers that Monty was smart enough to realize that he would have had a nervous breakdown and probably would have, who knows what, had he taken the offer.
He lived into his 80s and maybe even
More.
90.
He was 90. He was 90.
Wow, and Jackie, poor rest his soul,
Jackie was
died
53.
And
Jackie
he took on
all,
I think Jackie took on all of those things that
Absolutely.
Monty would have had to take on, and it probably would have, things might have, not that Jackie might have lived to be 90, and you know, you never know, but
Jackie to me is as much a martyr to that cause as Martin Luther King is, for that reason. Jackie Robinson, what Jackie Robinson did was miraculous, was amazing, to take on an entire country. The whole country didn't want him to do it. Branch Rickey's wife didn't want him to bring Robinson up. Branch Rickey's children didn't want Branch Rickey to bring Robinson up.
Really?
The amazing thing about Branch Rickey was that Rickey, more than anything else, there were two aspects of it. One, he thought that if he could bring 2 or 3 of the great African-American players to the Dodgers, that they would win more games, which ended up happening. They got Roy Campanella and Don Newcomb and Junior Gilliam and a couple other very fine players. But the other thing was that when Branch Rickey was a coach, he was a coach at I think the school was somewhere in Michigan, a small school, and they went to Notre Dame to play a game. And he was the coach of the team, the adult coach of the team. And their catcher was African American. And the hotel at Notre Dame would not let this guy into the hotel. And so Rickey said to the guy, if you let him room with me, can he stay? And the guy said, I will let him room with you, but he can't come into the dining room and eat with the rest of you. So Rickey gave the kid his key and sent the kid upstairs. And after handing out the rest of the keys, he went back upstairs to his room to find this fella. I think his name was Thomas. To find this fella trying to literally rip his skin off. And he never forgot that. He never forgot that. And he always, at least the way he tells it, always thought that he was going to do something to make up for the pain that his player Thomas was feeling that day.
Physically and mentally.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So you know, people can say whatever they want about Rickey. He was apparently very tight-fisted. Jackie Robinson made a whole $5,000 the first year that he played. But what he did was truly, you know, not from 2017, but from 1946 was amazing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the thing about Robinson, let me interrupt you for a second. The thing about Robinson that we kind of forget, they started off going something like 0 for 19, and everybody was going, this guy will never make it. And in 6 weeks, literally 6 weeks, he took the Dodgers to the top of the National League, and in 6 weeks, he showed Brooklyn that this guy was a star. And all the kids in Brooklyn, they all wanted to run like him. They held their bat high up in the air like him. They imitated him. They stole home plate like him.
With his pigeon-toed
Absolutely.
run.
Absolutely.
I can still remember being a kid and trying to walk the way he walked. Didn't work for me. But that's all right.
It didn't work for a lot of kids. But the fact of the matter is, kids, all of these kids loved Jackie Robinson, and it had an effect on our country. Jackie Robinson, to me, if he hadn't succeeded, you know, it's been said before, but if he hadn't succeeded, who knows if Martin Luther King would have succeeded? It's hard to know. But as soon as Jackie succeeded and showed he was as good a player as the white players, the whole myth about the inferiority of the Negro went right out the window. That was it. One guy did that. Jackie.
And I still love the answer that Martin Luther King gave in response to being introduced as the father of the civil rights movement. He said, I'm not the father of the civil rights movement. You give me too much credit. Credit goes to Jackie Robinson. Without me, without him, there would be no civil rights at this time.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what a man.
I know.
You know, it all comes back when we started talking about baseball, you and I, over a year ago now. The first time, and I'm going to repost the show that we did sometime in the future, very, very shortly. It all comes back to talking about Mr. Rickey and Jackie Robinson. Everything in baseball, everything in life, as we know it in the years that we grew up in, and baseball's a microcosm of life, or life's a microcosm of baseball. I don't know which it is, but they run parallel, and the importance of those two men are incredible. We talked about not just bringing Jackie in with Mr. Rickey, what he did in the George Sicily years, in the Cardinal years, the early Cardinal years, then the Dodger years, then the Pirate years, then the Cardinal, then the Continental League, and the Cardinals again when he in the 60s he was a consultant and very much used. He wasn't just a figurehead in those years. An incredible man.
Yes, he was. He absolutely was. No two ways about it. Probably the most important baseball executive who ever was. But you go back to Veeck. Veeck, even before, before he did things like bringing up the midget in 1951, he was the owner of the Cleveland Indians in the 1940s. He brought up Larry Doby. He brought up Satchel Paige. Satchel Paige pitched Cleveland to a pennant and a championship in 1948.
Right, he jumped right on it. Doby was
he did.
Doby
he jumped right on it. And then after Veeck went over and bought the St. Louis Browns, he brought Paige over to pitch for the St. Louis Browns as well. It was interesting because I had the opportunity to interview Marty Marion. One of the books I wrote was called The Spirit of St. Louis. I figured that Charles Lindbergh wouldn't mind. I called it the Spirit of St. Louis, and Marty Marion was the manager of those St. Louis Browns teams in the early 1950s, and he really he hated Satchel Paige because Paige, and the reason Rickey never brought Paige in to be the first guy was that Paige was a very independent guy. Paige was used to flying in his own plane, doing what he wanted to do, and he was very hard to control, and he drove Marty Marion crazy, which I thought was a hoot, because Marion was part of that St. Louis Cardinal team that was going to strike because Jackie Robinson was joining the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I'm sure, even though Marion he denied it to me, I'm sure he was one of those people like Eno Slaughter and everybody except Stan Musial who really didn't want Jackie Robinson playing in the major leagues. But Veeck was just a thorn in the side of the other owners. Unfortunately for Veeck, when he owned the Browns, he didn't have very much money, and so they didn't have very good teams. So, for instance, in 1951, he had some sort of birthday, and during the between games of a doubleheader, he had this little midget pop out of a cake. And everybody's going, "Oh, midget pops out of a cake. You know, what's the big deal?" Well, the second game rolls along, and the midget, whose name was Eddie Gay Dell, Gaeedel, he was wearing uniform number 1/8. He went up to the plate to hit, and the place went crazy. The place went absolutely crazy. And they said to him, Veeck wrote this marvelous book. If you haven't read it, you must. It's called Veeck as in Wreck. He did it with Ed Lynn.
As a kid, I read it.
Wonderful.
It was wonderful.
Ed Lynn was a wonderful writer, a terrific person.
And the follow-up book that he did, we may have talked about that, was a terrific book as well.
8 pounds short of a load or something like that.
Something
not
like
nearly as gripping as the first one.
No,
the
but
first
it
one
did talk about negotiations with Stoneham and how these these guys sit in a room and what determines trades and what have you. And for kids,
let me go back to finish the Gay Dell story for the moment. The thing about Gay Dell is he wanted to go up and hit. I mean, the guy was about 3'4", and he wanted to go up and hit.
Right.
And so the sports information guy, who was Bob Fischel at the time. Bob Fischel ended up being the Yankee PR guy who actually gave me my start in my career, along with Marty Appel. So they went to Gay Dell and said, "You're going to go up and hit, but I want you to know that if you swing the bat, we have a man standing up in the stands, and he's going to shoot you if you swing the bat. We're going to put a bullet right through your brain if you dare to swing the bat," which is a very funny story. And so he took 4 balls. The poor Detroit pitcher could not throw him a strike, and he walked, and then they replaced him with the fella in center field who was going to be the starter anyway, and that was Eddie Gay Dell's career. That was his whole career. And,
I didn't realize it was the first. I thought he had pinch hit for someone.
No,
he was the first guy.
He was the first guy up
in the
for the
second
Browns
game.
in the second game. Right.
Okay. And I do remember that Bob Sugar Kane.
Yeah, Bob Kane was the pitcher, and Bob Price. I think Bob Price was the catcher, something like that. And it was a hoot. It was an absolute hoot. But that's the sort of thing that Veeck would do. I mean, Veeck, when he owned the Chicago White Sox in the 1980s, put fireworks in the stadium, and absolutely
infuriated the Yankees. You also had that year night later in his career.
Well, they had what, 10-cent beer night, and towards the end of the game of 10-cent beer night, they had a riot. It was not Veeck's smartest idea. But Veeck used to do things. Veeck used to do things like give out, 10,000 lobsters, and they were live lobsters.
Records.
Yeah. Well, that was Disco Demolition Night. That was another one of his beauties. Disco Demolition Night, and that resulted in a riot. But Veeck was the sort of guy who used to sit in his underwear out in the bleachers with the fans. And they loved him. They absolutely loved him. Everybody loved him except the other owners. And I'm not even sure exactly why, what their problem was with him. I really don't. But the fact was that when he wanted to move the St. Louis
Browns, he was a different ilk, if I could inject that.
He was
a man's
kind
man.
Of guy.
He was a fan's man, a man's man.
Right.
Those people they had sticks up their ass.
That's true. Yeah. And he used to nudge them. He used to give them a lot of crap, which was something.
Right.
So when it came time for him to move the St. Louis Browns to Baltimore, he wanted to play in Baltimore for the 1954 season. He was in St. Louis in 1953. All the owners ganged up on him and said, yes, the St. Louis Browns can certainly move to Baltimore, but Bill Veeck, you can't. So he ended up selling the team. He sold the team, and he didn't go with it. And it wasn't until somewhere it wasn't until the 1970s that he got another opportunity to buy the White Sox.
Yeah. And yes, that's right. And he was innovative.
Sure.
Then with the uniforms, remember the short pants and the collars on the uniform.
Yep.
Great baseball mind.
He was a great baseball mind. And
before
Ralphie,
I let
my
you
boy.
go, well, let me ask you one quick question.
Yep.
Stan Musial. Anything, you wrote that book, and you mentioned his name.
gentleman I have ever had the pleasure of meeting. Stan Musial was such a prince, just a wonderful, wonderful person. And, for a guy who hit something like 340 lifetime and was one of the greatest players who ever played, I can't tell you just what an absolute gentleman and wonderful person he was. He was just great. Loved him.
He was a man who played the harmonica, for crying out loud.
He did that. He was something of a character. When he was in Donora, Pennsylvania, as a minor leaguer before he became a major leaguer, he started out as a pitcher. And he was not so hotsy-totsy. And if you remember the Black Sox scandal, what was the name of the pitcher who was not...
Seacott.
Who was not a Black Sox. He's the one who won the 2 games that they won.
Okay.
He was totally clean.
Interesting that I remembered Seacott, who got banned.
You remember Seacott, certainly in Williams, but you're not remembering the name of the fellow who won the 2 games because he wasn't crooked. At any rate, this fella was Stan Musial's manager and converted him from being a pitcher to a first baseman outfielder. And that's why he became a major league player.
Look
up the Black Sox scandal. You'll find the pitcher who won the 2 games for the White Sox that year. That's
good. We'll talk about that on the next show. Peter, it's a pleasure.
All right. Take care, Ralphie.
Thank you,
Have
my friend.
Week.
Enjoy your dinner. Right. Say hello to your 2 Wendy's for me.
I shall. Take care.
All right. Be well, my friend. And if you're still listening out there, everybody out there, this has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. I'm Ralph Tyko, the host, Peter Golenbock, the host, the professor. This has been so trippy for the last year. Thank you, everybody. Come back next week. Adios.